You know that knobby root you probably have in your kitchen right now? Ginger. It's amazing in a stir-fry, sure, but for thousands of years, people have sworn by it as their go-to remedy for an upset stomach. So the big question for us today is pretty simple. Does this ancient wisdom actually hold up under the microscope of modern science?
And when I say ancient, I really mean it. We're not just talking about your grandma's favorite remedy. Ginger's use for nausea was written down in Chinese pharmacopoeias all the way back in the 7th century. It has been a cornerstone of traditional medicine for literally millennia. But just because something's been around forever doesn't mean it works. History isn't the same as clinical proof. So today, we're going to do a deep dive. We're going to sift through the data from tons of high-quality clinical trials and find out what the evidence really says about ginger's power.
Okay, let's get into it. Before we even look at if it works, we kind of need to understand how it's supposed to work. What is actually going on inside your body when you take it?
So feeling nauseous is way more complex than you might think. Deep in your brain, you have what's literally called a vomiting center that acts like a command hub for that whole awful experience. And it gets its intel from 4 main places: from toxins it detects in your blood, from distress signals coming from your stomach and gut, from your inner ear trying to figure out motion, and even from psychological triggers. Now here's where it gets really fascinating. The secret sauce in ginger comes from these active compounds, mostly gingerols and shogols. What they do is they go into your gut and they block these specific serotonin receptors, the 5-HT3 receptors. And here's the kicker. That is the exact same biological mechanism used by powerful prescription anti-nausea drugs like Zofran. Ginger is basically closing the gate on nausea signals traveling from your stomach to your brain.
All right, so if ginger acts like a legit pharmaceutical, let's put it to the ultimate test. Let's see how it performs in one of the toughest scenarios imaginable: chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting. This stuff is notoriously severe and incredibly hard to control.
Now, to get a real, reliable answer, scientists didn't just look at 1 or 2 studies. They did the heavy lifting. They pulled together a massive systematic review, which means they analyzed the combined results from 23 of the absolute best, highest quality clinical trials on the subject. They literally sorted through hundreds of studies to get this gold standard data.
So what did they find? Well, for acute nausea, that's the wave that hits you within the first 24 hours of treatment, the overall result was no significant difference between ginger and placebo. Huh. Okay, probably not what you were expecting. All right, well, what about delayed nausea, the kind that can show up days later? When they looked at all the combined data, again, no significant overall benefit. So at this point, you might be thinking, okay, so the whole ginger thing is a bust for chemo, right? But wait, this is what I love about good science. The researchers didn't just stop at the surface-level results. They sliced the data in different ways, looking at different doses and timings. And when they zeroed in specifically on acute vomiting, not just the feeling of nausea, but the act itself, a completely different story emerged. And here it is. For the patients who took a specific dose, 1 gram or less of ginger per day, for more than 4 days, their odds of experiencing acute vomiting dropped by a staggering 70%. 70%! That is a huge effect. It just shows that the details, the dose, and the duration are absolutely crucial. Okay, so we've seen how nuanced it can be in an extreme case like chemotherapy. But what about the more common types of nausea that more of us are likely to face?
Well, the research is pretty extensive here, and it really focuses on 3 main areas: the infamous morning sickness that comes with pregnancy, good old motion sickness from travel, and that queasy feeling you can get after having surgery.
For morning sickness, the evidence is incredibly strong. We're talking multiple high-quality studies all showing that it consistently reduces how severe the nausea feels. In fact, it works about as well as vitamin B6, which is the standard medical recommendation. And get this, it's officially recognized as a safe option by the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. That's a pretty major endorsement.
Now, let's talk about motion sickness. And to do that, we have to talk about this one classic, absolutely brilliant study from Denmark. Researchers took 80 naval cadets who were not used to being on boats and just sent them out into heavy seas. I mean, you couldn't design a better real-world test for seasickness.
So what happened out there on the waves? Well, the cadets who took a gram of ginger had way fewer episodes of vomiting and those awful cold sweats. But here's the real game changer. Unlike common over-the-counter drugs like Dramamine, ginger doesn't make you drowsy. That's a huge plus if you actually need to, stay awake on your trip.
And finally, let's look at preventing nausea after an operation. The evidence here is really positive too.
A big review of studies found that taking 1 to 2 grams of ginger about an hour before surgery significantly cuts down on that post-op queasiness and means patients need fewer of the other anti-nausea drugs.
Okay, that was a lot of science. So, what does this all mean for you? We've walked through the evidence, now let's translate all of it into a simple, practical guide.
All right, this is your key takeaway slide. Think of it as a cheat sheet. Based on the clinical trials, for morning sickness, a good dose is about 1 gram total per day, but split up, say 250 milligrams 4 times a day with meals. For chemotherapy, it's about half a gram to a full gram daily, and the key is to start it 3 days before treatment. For motion sickness, about a gram 30 to 60 minutes before you travel should do the trick. And for post-op, 1 to 2 grams about an hour before surgery. Now, of course, and this is super important, you should always talk with your doctor before starting any new supplement.
So, in the end, ginger is this fantastic example of an ancient remedy that, for the most part, really does hold up to serious scientific testing. It really makes you wonder, if a simple, common root like this holds so much power, what other natural remedies are just out there, waiting for their own scientific close-up?